I read a lot of historical romance. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Now for today's video, I am deciding to revisit the subgenre that kind of made my whole entire 2021 year, where I just continuously read a lot of historical romance. I feel like a lot of my followers here on booktube actually found me because of this subgenre, because I was just basically dedicating every single video that I put out last year to historical romance. This year I kind of taken a step back with the subgenre. It's not like I fell out of love with it. It's just that I had so many contemporary romances that I wanted to try and read that I just stopped reading historical romance, and that was bad. I wanted to go back to it. I wanted to revisit the roots, and I wanted to fall back in love with it and hopefully start my historical romance binging addiction once again. So I decided to pick up a few novels that were published from last year and also this year that have been on my TBR forever, from authors that I just love and adore, and with every hope that it reminds me of how much I used to love the genre and that I should continue reading it for the rest of 2022. So I think the first book that I want to talk about is this one from Caroline Linden. This one's called All the Duke I Need, and it's book number 3 in her Desperately Seeking a Duke series. Now, I fell in love with Caroline Linden last year. I really enjoyed her writing, and I especially really enjoyed the first book in the series, which is called About a Rogue. It was one of my favorites of 2021. So I wanted to continue the series, even though book number 2, which is called A Scot to the Heart, wasn't my favorite. But I wanted to see how the series would essentially wrap up. And basically, this series follows like the long lost Duke trope, meaning like our heroes are born into the working class and then only to discover that their heritage, or they discover that their lineage is tied to nobility. So our hero is hired to take care of the estate that our heroine is living on, and he's very particular about a lot of things. He likes to follow the rules. He likes to make sure that everything is fair and equal on the land, making sure that everybody's being taken care of. And often at times he has to go head to head with his employer, which just so happens to be our heroine's like grandmother or caregiver. And so our heroine is kind of born into the upper class because someone from a very higher class took care of her and raised her because of her lineage. And so she is expected to have a good marriage with someone, of course, of the same level as her. So this is kind of like a forbidden relationship because they're both from different classes. And it's only until we discover that our hero's lineage might be a little bit more complicated than imagined, and that he might be the long lost Duke. So this one, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought that the writing was really good. I thought the slow burn romance from our heroine turning into enemies and then turning into friends and then turning into lovers, I thought that was very fun to see it develop into a long lasting relationship. However, there were a lot of parts of this book that focused a lot on taking care of the land and taking care of the people, and so it turned into a very slow burn romance. If you're not in the mood for a slow burn historical romance, you could probably feel that this one is a little bit slow. So towards the end, I was just kind of waiting for the book to end because nothing much was really happening, and the main problem was our hero kind of keeping his lineage a secret once he found out about it. So that was just kind of disappointing, but overall I would still recommend you to pick up any Caroline Linden books because I find that her books have this very uniqueness to it that keeps you captivated and keeps you just reading the book and just to see what happens. But I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I read was this one from Lorraine Heath. This one's called The Duchess Hunt, and this is book number 2 in Once Upon a Dukedom. Now, I love Lorraine Heath. She is one of my auto-buy historical romance authors. I find that her stories are just the right amount of drama. It's entertaining, it's romantic, it's hot, it's sexy. It's everything that you want in a historical romance. So I was kind of putting this book off for the longest time. So this one was released probably like last fall, and her latest novel is out in August, I believe. And so I was putting this off mostly because it followed a trope that is especially very angsty, and I personally don't really like angst. I like it to be very sweet, romantic fiction, something very cut and dry, because once it gets really angsty and taboo, it gets really like it gives me a lot of anxiety. So I was putting this off simply because it followed the trope of unrequited love. Our heroine is essentially a secretary for our hero, who is a duke, and our heroine is in love with the duke. But obviously she knows that she can't marry the duke because of her status, and also because there's a secret from her past, and she feels ashamed of it. So she's keeping everything a secret, and she's just trying to keep her emotions in line. But unfortunately for her, she actually has to help her employer, the Duke, our hero, try to find a wife. So her heart basically breaks every time she finds someone suitable, and to put it on like the long list of females that our hero has to meet. Meanwhile, our hero is kind of coming into terms with his own emotions for our heroine, because he just is very confused all the time whenever he sees her, and especially when she is dancing with other men at parties and things like that. He knows that she deserves to be happy, but he just can't give up the fact that they had such a nice bond as an employer and employee relationship. So this one was angsty a lot of the times, but it was also super romantic, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I really did enjoy it, but the only problem that I did have with this book was obviously towards the end, where our heroine's problem finally came out to light, and that the resolution for it was kind of felt like a little bit rushed. I felt like it built up to something bigger, and then like nothing really came out of it until like the whole secret was exposed. But overall, still really enjoyed this book, and I can't wait to see what Lorraine Heath puts out next. So the next book that I did pick up is this one from Eloisa James. I always forget how to say her name. It's like Eloisa or Eloisa, but this one's called How to Be a Wallflower, from her series called A Would-Be Wallflower novel. And now I think that this is a new series, but don't quote me on that because I'm not really too sure, and I don't really follow up with like the latest series trends. I just literally just buy authors that I'm familiar with, and then I read them, and then I tell you guys about it. It's a whole thing. But basically this essentially follows our heroine, who does not want to get married, and the way that she doesn't want to get married is by just kind of like standing out and doing something unconventional. So she tries to own this business which makes a lot of dresses, and she tries to stand out as being like the ugly wallflower. So she kind of like is deterring all these male prospects from marrying her, because now she is unlikable. Unfortunately for her, our hero also wants that fashion business, so they kind of go head to head, and it's an enemies to lovers romance. But this one didn't feel like enemies to lovers, mostly because there was just like a couple of scenes that were bickering and that they were fighting with each other, but ultimately they kind of fell into a lust trap where they just automatically just really liked each other and became friends out of it. And unfortunately for me, I didn't like this book. I gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars, mostly because I just don't care about fashion in historical romance. I don't care about fashion really in general in my books. So I found this book to be kind of annoying, because all they did was talk about like dressmaking and things like that, and the business side of things. I also didn't really like our characters, and I couldn't really care less if they got together or not. So unfortunately for me, this one is a pass. And if you guys know me, historically, I don't really like Eloisa James books, so this wasn't really a surprise to me that I didn't like this one either. The next book that I did pick up is this one from Eva Leigh. This one is called The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes, and this is part of her series called Last Chance Scoundrels. Now, I think this is the beginning of her new series, so I'm excited to see whatever book she puts out next. Eva Leigh has quickly become one of my auto-buy authors, simply because she wrote this book called Waiting for a Scot Like You, and I really liked how unconventionally good it was, because it was a historical romance involving an older female heroine who wanted to have sexual explorations, and in the form of group, you know. So our hero has to take her to that situation, and I thought that Eva Leigh was just so different from all the historical romance, exploring different plot lines that I've never seen before. So this one essentially follows kind of a more cookie cutter plot line. Our heroine is expected to marry, and then our hero is also expected to be married too, as well, to a nice woman, because his reputation is tarnished, and he just needs like a nice girl to kind of like bring him in and make sure that he is, you know, following the lines of what society tells him to do. So essentially our heroine is tasked to help him find a suitable wife. And this is the story of like kind of like a friends to lovers romance, because at first they didn't really like each other, and then they decided to help each other out, and she has to help him find a wife. But somewhere along the way, like, they obviously do fall in love. Now this one, I felt that it was kind of a very slow burn romance. Once again, it took on a slower pace, so I did feel there was like a lull in the storyline where I was kind of just waiting for something to happen. But overall, I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I still really enjoyed the story, and of course this one definitely had a lot of hot chili pepper scenes. If you guys are not familiar with Eloisa, she definitely writes a lot of steamy historical romances. So the last book that I did read is this one called His Lessons on Love by Cathy Maxwell. Now, I do have a physical copy of this book. I just don't know where I put it. I lost it on my bookshelf, so I'm a little bit disappointed because I did pay money for it and I swear I bought it, but I don't have it right now to show you guys. So this one essentially follows a single father trope, which is like something kind of like heard of in historical romances, but essentially our hero accidentally impregnated a girl, and then the girl was fed up with the baby, and the girl just kind of dumped the baby into his hands, and then now he is tasked to take care of a child, and he himself is kind of like a child too. He's like a rogue, so he doesn't know how to take care of a child, so somebody steps in to take care of the child, and that somebody is our heroine. Our heroine is kind of having no job, no prospects, so she had her last resort, and her last resort was to really just get hired by our hero to take care of this child. But of course, along the way, things do happen that cause scandal, and they actually end up fake courting each other / going into a fake marriage so that they can protect each other's like reputation. And so this is like the story of them pretending to be a family, but actually becoming a really nice, cute family. And I adored this story, actually. This one surprised me because sometimes, like, Cathy Maxwell books don't really sit well with me. Like, I don't really like them as much as other authors. And this one, I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, so very close to 4 out of 5 stars. I actually read book number 2 in the series called Her First Desire, and that one I just didn't like at all. I gave that one a 2 out of 5 stars, so when I was entering into this book, I had really low expectations that I would like the third book in the series, but surprisingly, I really did like it, and I would definitely recommend you to check this one out if you're just looking for a sweet romance about our hero falling in love with his baby and also falling in love with his fake wife. But overall, that is it for all the books I have read for this week of historical romances. I definitely am more interested in reading more of the books that are on my shelves and on my TBR now. I feel like I have somewhat started the rekindling of the fire of me diving deeper into historical romances. So maybe you guys will see more videos of me reading more historical romances in the future. Let me know if this is the genre that you have followed me for, or let me know if you want to see more historical romance content. And I'll see you guys again next time in a new video. Bye.